Test, can you hear me? All good? Can you test this? Huh? Yeah, I started. Hang on one sec. Stand by. Testing. I'll fix the camera. Sorry about that. We're just test. All right. Okay. We're live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Fastlane Friday. I'm your host, Sean Urban, delivering you the latest news and drama in the NASCAR world. And this past weekend, rather, NASCAR officially kicked off its first race of the season with the Daytona 500, the crown jewel, the Super Bowl of NASCAR, and I'll get to that on later point. And once again, the Hendrick cars dominate qualifying, but once again, have a quiet Daytona 500 as all cars slowly disappear, starting from Chase Elliott, William Byron, and then later in the race, Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson getting knocked out and not being able to finish the race. And the opening qualifiers who got in on speed this weekend that were able to make the 500 and had pretty good showings considering they ran up in the top 10 the top 10, 20 for a majority of the day, even though these guys had either zero cup experience or hadn't raced in a cup car in a while. So Jimmy Johnson and Travis Pastrana would lock themselves into the Daytona 500 on the qualifying speed. And in the duels this past Thursday, Zane Smith and I believe who else? I believe it was Zane Smith and Connor Daly on an absolute fluke. I'd say that luck was on Connor Daly's side this weekend when he raced in. At first, during the race, he was falling back a little bit. He was suffering from some mechanical issues and eventually got placed one lap down. But in a wreck around the third quarter of the second duel race, Austin Hill, who was ahead at the time and would have made it in on the 500 through the duel, crashed himself out, and that left only Connor Daly in the race to take the final Daytona 500 spot. So the summary I'd say for this race is let's just say during the broadcast I asked for some racing with my commercials as the majority of the broadcast was oversaturated with ads, whether it was from Wendy's or FedEx. There was seemingly an advertisement or a commercial string every 9 or so laps. But moving away from that point, the day was majority. Hold on one sec. A majority of the day would be dominated by Roush Fenwick Keselowski Racing as Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski, the owner driver, swap positions throughout the race, and even a couple of stints where Chevrolet was showing their dominance during it. And one of the points that was brought up from the Daytona 500 was that I think will be a future problem is how trigger happy the officials are to throw the caution. So this was towards the end of the race. I believe it was Kyle Busch. Yeah. So Kyle Busch and RCR would dominate the latter half of the race, along with his teammate Austin Dillon. And coming to, I think, 2 or 3 laps to go, Daniel Suarez spun. But the problem was that they threw the caution early. He would end up getting stuck in the grass. But as soon as he spun, he was skewed, but he wasn't like completely spinning. He was drifting towards the inside wall, but then managed to get it corrected. And then all of a sudden, officials throw the caution and re-rack the field. And Kyle Busch and themselves, if that was 1998, they would have won the race since there was no overtime rules. They would always race back to the caution flag or to the pace car back then. But Rubbin's racing, and the main story of the weekend I'd say was that it was the little Stenhouse that could, as Ricky Stenhouse Jr., probably one of the biggest memes in NASCAR, pulled off one of the biggest upsets in win of all time, JTT Jottery, who had converted to a one-car operation, also made history this weekend as Brett Daugherty, a former NBA basketball player, would become the first African American owner to win the Daytona 500, and Ricky Stenhouse winning also in terms of lap the longest Daytona 500 ever. I was a little bit confused when they said it at first when they were talking about it. I was like, well, there have been rain delays, but I meant in terms of laps, that was the longest Daytona 500 that was on the schedule. And yeah, so a couple things to look forward to this weekend. There's been no new drama, no sponsorship ship deals or drivers moving up this weekend. It's been a relatively quiet off week as we prepare to say farewell to the 2 Mile Auto Club Speedway. After the 2022 race, there was recent allegations that the track was going to stay at the 2 Mile. They announced back during the pandemic that they would be converting the 2 miler into a short track, but they recently confirmed that Speedway Motorsports recently confirmed that, yeah, we're gonna take a sabbatical for 2024, and we're gonna race at the 2 miler one more time, and then after that, they're gonna begin to start tearing down and converting the current 2 mile oval into a half-mile short track with banks like Bristol and straightaways like Martinsville that will just spit you right out as you head into the corners. And so a bid farewell to that. A lot of popular stories that would come about from Auto Club would be obviously Jeff Gordon's inaugural win, the California Kid winning at the first time or the first race at California. There would be the infamous spat between Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano following him moving to Team Penske a year prior, and Tony Stewart and him scuffling on pit road. One of the more recent histories was Alex Bowman's commanding win and the final win in the 88 car. They would retire the 88 number for the 40 to make room for the 5 for Kyle Larson. And obviously the absolute banger of a race at Club last year along with Charlotte. And I'm going to bring it to a point in Charlotte. I'm going back to Charlotte Motor Speedway this summer for the Coca-Cola 400. And I missed it last year. I went to the 2021 where it was the last year of air-dependent track packages, but I could have watched another 400 laps of that race. But now that I saw probably the best race of the 2022 season and one of the most best races of all time, in my opinion, I immediately booked the tickets, and I'm going to be right back at the restart zone, almost in the same spot I was 2 years later. I'll show you guys my seat from 2 years ago. Right here. This was where I was sitting right at the track. And you see the Geico letters, that is where the restart zone, that's for the sponsors. They always name it the Geico Restart Zone for advertisement, and that's NASCAR's an advertisement sport, but going back to the point on advertisements, the only times I think it'd be acceptable to show ads is after around, depending on the track, I'd say around 10 or 20 laps after a race, and only throw like a huge string during commercials or cautions. Then I would think it would be fine. But even during cautions, I think that you should be able to see the broadcast side by side and enlarge the camera a bit. And yeah, so going on before the end, I'm going to share the story of the week in the past NASCAR as part of the 75-year celebration, and then I'm going to make a special announcement at the end for anyone who's watching. And yeah, let's get to the story. So it's fall. So it's 2001 in NASCAR. It's the 4th of July weekend. Even after Steve Park's dominant win, the sport is still reeling following the death of Dale Earnhardt in the Daytona 500. During what is now NBC's what was known as NBC's first race, they pulled out all the stops with celebrities and pizzazz and a lot of popular sponsors coming on. Dale Jr. would take pole in the first time return to Daytona since the death of his father, Dale Earnhardt. And through the race, he would lead and lead and lead. And eventually, at the beginning of the race, he would pass the car, what was rebranded as the 29 car from the 3, driven by Kevin Harvick at the time. He would eventually pass his former father's car and would continue to lead until cautions around 30 to 20 laps to go changed everything. And despite a charging Bobby Labonte, and along with the push from Michael Waltrip, who had won the 500, but that was overmired by the tragedy of Earnhardt, eventually Dale Earnhardt Jr., as the broadcast says, would use lessons learned from his father to win from first and score the victory in the Pepsi 400. The race would provide that healing factor that NASCAR had needed for so long. It would set not just NBC's future hurtling forward with the NASCAR, but also Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s as well. Eventually, he would combine to take almost 14 victories within the next 3 seasons. He would also create a moment of healing for America by winning the first NASCAR race at Dover after 9/11, and would win at Talladega a year after his father's last win. And this would also, and like I said, this sent NBC hurtling forward. The race would be a smash hit, and with 25 million viewers, this was the most watched night race of NASCAR at the time. And the race would earn a 6.1 in ratings and would secure NBC's future with NASCAR. And with the Daytona story of the little Stenhouse that could, and with Dale Jr. winning the Pepsi 400, I'm going to start off this story time with a wholesome story of healing and learning to move on and move forward following a tragedy. And before we end this off, I am looking for a co-host, even though I have James in the studio, my station manager. Yo, James, how you doing in there? Good? Yeah? All right. I have James here, but it's always nice to talk with someone who shares a common interest in the sport with me. And if you have a decent background in NASCAR, um, if you know a little bit about the sport, if you want me to educate you or teach you anything on the sport, email me. My email is surban2@gales.iona.edu. If you want more information on becoming a co-host, I'll walk you through the process. I'll interview you and see if you have what it takes. But right now, if you're the only one that shows up, then congrats, you got the co-host job. But yeah, if you want to co-host with me for Fastlane Fridays, email me at surban2@gales.iona.edu, and I'll provide more information on that next week. And until next time, have a good day, everyone.